Hello, everyone. Oh, wait.
No,
Go ahead.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Herman H. Michael Williams, and today I would just like to take about 60 minutes of your time and introduce you to Washington, D.C. and what the epidemic of HIV looks like and how it's impacting the city that I live in. Next slide, please. All right. So, Washington, D.C. is a rich city of history, culture. A lot of African Americans migrated to the city after the emancipation of slavery. There was a lot of African Americans that were still in the city. From about 1975, it was about 70% African American, which got the name Chocolate City. So about 2014, that has dropped to about a little under 51%. It's about like 48% actually. And the city looks more like a mix, a blend. So it's no longer Chocolate City, you know. And this is DC is a very political city. Just a little bit of flavor here. You can see a lot of protests. You can even go back to the beginning, the 60s, the 50s. There was a lot of marches, a lot of protests. So the people from that city are eager and ready to move and take action. Here we have a famous spot here, Ben's Chili Bowl, Metro. It's a lot of culture. This is this guy right here, Chuck Brown, go-go guy. He created the Godfather of Go-Go, which is music that from DC. Of course, Washington Redskins, and the DC flag right here. And this is one of the signs when you're going into the southeast area, which is where a lot of the large population of African Americans live, which is in wards 7 and 8. You'll see this sign as you're driving in from Maryland to DC. And this was Chocolate City. Next slide, please. Demographics. Poverty rate. We're the third in the nation to have the highest poverty rate of 28%. And these are all numbers taken from African American data. The unemployment rate, 12.6%. Now, DC is a very small city compared to places like Little Rock and Baltimore, other places like that. DC is relatively small. The high school graduates is about a little over 50% of the graduates actually plan to go to college. And that's you know, obviously something's happening. If only half of the people that graduate plan to continue education, yet you have this high poverty rate, this high unemployment rate, something's happening. The median income, $37,000 a year. DC is a very expensive city. It's really no way you can really live off $37,000, especially if you know, more than one person. So, next slide, please. More of the epidemiological data. The black population, like I said, is a little bit under 50%. And we're from that 75%, now it's about 46, 50%. Prevalence rates, 2.4%. Incidence rates, 75%. Once again, DC is very small. And if African Americans only make up half of the population, but more than half of the incidence rates of HIV, it's definitely a problem. The transmission routes, MSM and heterosexual contact are the leading routes of transmission in Washington, D.C. And mortality rates, 251, which is a high number because, like I said, it's a small, dense population. Next slide, please. This is just another chart that kind of basically show, this is MSM, and they also in this graph included MSM IDU, and this is heterosexuals, female heterosexuals. So these are the two highest modes of transmission. This is another visual way to see the chart, and as you see, there's other races here, white, female, Hispanic. So the numbers are small, but yet we all live in the same small area. But yet the proportions of HIV are very different. Next slide, please. Age. In Washington, D.C., the epidemic is an older epidemic. Most of the individuals that are living with HIV are between the ages of 40, 49, 50, 60. So the seniors, or the older ones, I don't want to say seniors, but older, it's an older epidemic. Some people believe that this is because this population, typically the men, kind of mess around with this population and kind of bring it back home. So to the nursing homes and the other living facilities that they might stay in their other communities. That's another thing about DC, they kind of stay within their networks, so they're bringing things back to their network. Next slide, please. This is just another, what the city looks like. It's a lot of poverty, homelessness, drugs. A lot of the neighborhoods kind of run down, rough. The food, poor food, lots of carryouts, really not a lot of grocery stores. It's like a food desert. I will say there are lots of programs, you know, to kind of feed, but you know, you need more than just food sometimes. You need a little bit more than that. Once again, we'll look at some of the high school graduates. As you can see, it's predominantly females that particularly are graduating. And you do have some males that achieve, but it's mainly females. You look at the statistics. Do the next slide, please. All right, so in our city, Washington, D.C., we did our needs assessment, and we discovered that there are a lot of services provided around HIV, around healthcare, around, you know, any basic need. There is a service. However, people aren't accessing the service for whatever reason, whatever barrier that they're having. They're just not accessing the service. And there are more advocates. We need more advocates. There are not enough people. Like when I showed you that slide before, you've seen the marches, you've seen the people protesting. That kind of synergy is not in the city anymore. It's kind of died off. We don't have any real leaders that are still carrying that torch to pass on to the next generation. So we definitely need more advocates on all levels, not just HIV, but just on all levels and aspects. We need more skills around disclosure. There aren't any programs I can think of to help a person develop that conversation, have that moment to share whatever they need to share. There aren't any programs like that. And then people need to have accurate, concise resource guide. Like I said, there's services available, but people just don't know how to access it. They might not know where it is. So they need a guide that's consistent and up to date, because a lot of services aren't even in existence anymore, or they've merged, or they're doing something new. So we need to have an updated guide rather, so that they can have access to what's current in our city. Next slide, please. All right. So, like I said, there are ample services around testing. We have linkage to care services. Most places that provide HIV testing or hepatitis C testing or any type of testing or screening, there is a place where they can link you to. There are support services around issues like HIV and different little groups that you can attend, substance abuse, all that type of stuff. But generally, they might be in areas or pockets of the neighborhood where a person might not feel comfortable accessing because of stigma and other barriers. Medical coverage is excellent in DC. Medicaid, Medicare, if you're a DC resident, you're eligible pretty much for it. Case management is available, housing, transitional homes, and because we do have a lot of these services, a lot of people flock to DC so they can take advantage of this, and sometimes that creates a waiting list for some of these things, but they're still available. Just sometimes the waiting list might be extremely long because you have a lot of people coming in from other places to use the services. Next slide, please. The gap analysis. So, after reviewing all of that, we realized there were no specific services around disclosure, like I said earlier. No specific programs around advocacy and training upcoming leaders. And there's a need for greater services to keep the retention, especially when it comes to linking to care. We do a great job of getting you to that first appointment, but somewhere down the continuum, it kind of drops off. So we're trying to figure out how we can engage the community. And one way that we discovered through the needs assessment and through BTAN was the educational component, which we'll get into more in the presentation. Next slide, please. All right, we're here. So the Black Treatment Advocates Network, very important. BTAN is extremely important to the movement because DC is a place where there's a lack of knowledge. There's a lack of knowledge about how to access services. There's a lack of knowledge about services available. There's a lack of knowledge about your options as far as biomedical treatment. So that educational, treatment education was very important to me because that was something that I realized the city needs. They need to know all the available options to make informed decisions. All right, so these are some of the things that BTAN is going to do. We're going to raise that science and treatment literacy. And we did that through training myself and another colleague from DC, and we brought that information back. And hopefully, we're going to develop advocates through that. It's going to be an ongoing process. But, the goal is to develop some advocates, and we're going to strengthen the leadership within our community. Because if we can develop leaders and peers that are making positive change, it should affect the circles and networks that they're in. Next slide, please. All right. So B10 is part of a commitment. Yes, it is. And B10 understands that if you focus on those 4 project areas, you should be able to make these things happen. So there should be stigmatizing behavior. People should be less likely to participate in that because now you have an understanding of how HIV works, how it is transmitted, how it's not transmitted, the science behind it, the importance of taking your medicine, the importance of being undetectable. So if the person can understand that and break away from those myths that they've been taught or that they've heard, they'll be less likely to discriminate. People that are positive, they'll be more likely to access treatment because they understand, hey, I'm positive. If I get undetectable, I won't transmit. So, and some people don't understand that being positive, they're afraid the medicine's gonna, make them grotesque or whatever. They'll have these nightmarish experiences on treatment, and that's not the case. We're in a new era of medicine, and like I said, people don't know that. They still think that we're back in the AZT days of HIV treatment. And lastly, we'll be better positioned to influence policy in our community. A lot of the decision-making tables, we're not at the table. And that's because we might not know where that table is, or we just don't know what's going on. So the education piece, like I said, is very, 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 very important. Next slide, please. The mission, to produce and support a nationwide network of highly trained Black treatment advocates. And like I said, once again, me being a part of the B10, thank you. Me being a part of, yeah, I did. Me being a part of B10, I was able to experience the knowledge that would help to actually do those things from the previous slide that will decrease the stigma and that will breed advocacy and leadership. Next slide, please. Yes. So to serve as educators and opinion leaders, like I was saying previously, B10 has actually helped me to be better able to do these things. I'm not all the way 100 yet, but I'm definitely further along than I was when I started. Providing a pipeline of trained advocates, it's very important because in this room, I've created a network with people that aren't even in my city. And now I'm able to reach out and see how the epidemic is in other parts of the United States and, discuss best practices. Hey, what's working over there for you? We can try different things and just network on a national level. Of course, we want to increase the utilization of appropriate treatment. Once again, that educational piece, just reinforcing the importance of being on antiretroviral therapy if you are positive, and maybe even if you're not positive, maybe you might be interested in PrEP or PEP, which once again the community doesn't know about, and we'll get into that later as well. And so overall, we just want to improve the treatment adherence in the Black community, not just around HIV, but around all health disparities. We suffer from high blood pressure, diabetes, just like anything you can think of seems to have the heaviest burden on African Americans when it comes to health care and poverty in our country. Next slide, please. So the goal of B10 will be to cultivate and support this network. And they're actually doing a wonderful job at Black AIDS Institute. They're always there when you need them to help us further along into this journey, into this process, and I'm grateful for that. Next slide, please. And they also would like for us to help link, to increase demand. Once again, just what I was saying, just getting a better understanding of why it's important to be on treatment, why it's important to stay in care, why is it important to get involved in the happenings in the community around HIV and healthcare. And that's just some of the things that B10 is going to impact. Next slide, please. B10 city history. These are some of the cities that are currently in action. You see Houston, Jackson, Mississippi, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 2010, 2011, Atlanta, Georgia, Chicago, Los Angeles, 2012, Louisiana, Baton Rouge. So these are cities that are already existing, already doing things around B10. Next slide, please. These are the newer cities. Washington, D.C., that's my city. We actually launched in late 2013. So we're fairly new. We're doing some things, which we'll see later on. Little Rock, we just heard about Little Rock and what's popping in Little Rock. They're doing amazing things there. And Baltimore, which is actually like 40 minutes from D.C., and the epidemic is like totally different. But these are all great places. Kingston, Jamaica, never been, would like to go. We'll probably be seeing how that epidemic looks. And Melbourne, Florida. That's another new city, so we'll hear more about that as well. Next slide, please. Project areas. These are the 4 project areas. You previously heard them: treatment education, patient navigation, disclosure, and advocacy. All these work together to make those impacts that we talked about previously. But when it comes to my city, Washington, D.C., before we even get to disclosure and advocacy, we need to educate and get the people using the services that are already available. So that's going to be the focus of our B10 right now. Although we do realize the importance of the 4, we want to focus on the 2 first. So, next slide, please. The logic model. So as you see, this is the logic model that basically your B10, you follow this, you'll end up there. You don't have to touch on that. You don't have to touch on that. Thank you. Next slide, please. Development and advancement of the B10 in my city. All right, so you can go to the next slide. This is my little title. I was excited about my font. All right, so we had our first B10 launch reception August the 5th, and the science and treatment training August 6th to 8th. Now, during this time, I was actually in LA at UCLA in the science and treatment cohort. So I wasn't able to be in DC during that time, but I did secure the venue, and I did have staff from my organization. They were there, so I know that they were there. Sparingly, but they were there. September the 24th, I was actually here for this training, and we had that at DC Care Consortium, which Tanya Henderson, who was the co-chair and also helped in this project, she was affiliated with DC Care Consortium, and they did provide space for us to have that training for the 2 days. Well, sorry, for both sections, because we also did the training there again, September 30th through October the 2nd. You can do the next slide. These are some of the B10 members that were recruited. They did come to the training that I was at DC Care Consortium. I'm not sure if they were there at the initial training because I was in LA, but these members also attended the B10 meetings that we held after we got back and got the ball rolling. So you have AIDS Clinical Trial Group, AIDS Healthcare Foundation, Black AIDS Institute, Community Education Group, that's my organization, Damien Ministries, DC Care Consortium, Developmental Center for AIDS, George Washington University. There's also a couple of partners, oh no, they're up there, University of District of Columbia and National Council of Negro Women. So, and that list is kind of grown. We do have some religious-based churches that are involved. So I know when we heard about Little Rock and how the church really wasn't doing anything around HIV, it was kind of shocking because in DC they actually are. They do have testing in churches, and we'll get into a little bit more of that later. But these are some of the members in our B10, and they represent different AIDS service providers in the city. Next slide, please. So engaging traditional Black institutions. What can I say about that? First of all, technology played a really big part in engagement because oftentimes you couldn't do face-to-face meetings, although we did do quite a few. Emails, telephone calls, all that stuff came into play to be able to engage. A lot of times, oftentimes scheduling really wasn't cohesive. A lot of times when you engage traditional Black institutions, collaboration is a big thing. They want something for you to get something. So oftentimes we had to provide testing. We had to do either a HIV 101 seminar in order for them to either come to a training or to get involved in what we wanted. So it was kind of like a barter system. You do something for me, I'll do something for you. It was a little frustrating. Sometimes you had to really give it to them to let them know that you really meant business. DC is one of those places where very territorial. A lot of it has to do with funding. But now that more funding is coming in through the religious-based sector, they're reaching out to organizations that provide testing because a lot of them aren't certified to test. So that was like our kind of way in, like, hey, y'all need us. So that kind of worked in our favor. So a lot of collaboration and some face-to-face meetings, but more so technology, and sometimes I had to give out about it. But next slide, please. B10 trainings. All right, so previously when you and I talked about that training that I wasn't able to attend, and I believe that was the August one, I think that was that. No, this one here. So this is like the flyer that we had made. The BAI staff actually came up with this fantastic flyer here. And that was the other training. It's kind of hard to see, but that was the one I actually went to because we were back from our first cohort. And this right here was a training that I held at the health department. This was a provider training, and this was basically going to tie into the BTAN project, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So this is the flyer for a training that was held at the health department. Next slide, please. All right, so these are some pictures from the 3-day BTAN Science and Treatment training, which I was not at because I was in LA, or here in LA, UCLA. Some of the people, these are some staff members of mine here. So actually they're in there getting their train on. This guy here, Keith, I forgot his last name. Keith Green, yes. He was a TA for us when we were doing our cohort. Amazing dude. So that's the 3-day training, just a little snapshot of what that energy was in the room. Next picture. All right. This is another picture. Oh, this is actually from the 1-day Science Academy training. I was here for this one. This is Mr. Carpenter from the health department, and he came, he spoke, and also some of the topics, myself and Tanya, we did some of these topics that we had when we went through the first cohort: origins of HIV, the HIV life cycle, and the medication adherence. I actually did medication adherence and HIV life cycle because I didn't want to do origins, because I knew what I learned here, and I knew the audience that was there, and I didn't want no parts of that. So it was a very interesting conversation to talk about monkeys and stuff like that. We did pre and post tests. We had evaluations and surveys, and my partner, she has those things. So next slide, please. All right, more pictures. 3-day training. I was actually here for this one. There's Rania Prego. She's here, and she's doing the thing. I believe Alicia came for that one. Okay. So next slide, please. Just the pictures there. BTAN means you can skip over that. Next slide, please. We had some meetings. We did have about 2 or 3 meetings. The retention rate for that, we started off with maybe about 20, 25 people, but we got it down to about 7. But these are like really strong 7 core members, like they're ride or die. They do whatever I ask them to, so I'm pleased with that. Oh, you can skip that. I'm excited about my font, y'all. That was amazing. Okay, so BTAN project plan. The problem statement. The residents of Washington, D.C., particularly Wards 7 and 8, which are the highest, is the African-American populated areas, they need to be made aware of treatment and prevention options available and how to access those services. Like I said earlier, we had a training for service providers, because a lot of service providers don't know how to engage with community, with patients around their sexual health. And a lot of residents in DC, they don't know about PrEP, they don't know about PEP, and you know, we're living in an area where it's above epidemic proportions to HIV, so I think it would be beneficial to know all your available options, especially if you don't like condoms, or you have issues with wearing condoms every time. The goal is to enhance community knowledge around HIV biomedical prevention options and increase the understanding on how to access available services. Once again, DC has tons of services, but people aren't accessing them. It could be because they had a bad experience with the service provider, a little attitude, or it just could be a barrier of transportation, or maybe I don't want to go there because everybody knows what that place is about. So it's different things and reasonings behind why people aren't accessing. But one of those main reasons is because they just don't know. So we want to make sure that we can at least get that one out the way. So objectives. We plan to train service providers on all prevention options with special focus on PrEP and PEP. So basically going back to that flyer, and how we engage the service providers is to let them know, hey, if you don't know about PrEP, this is what it is, this is who's going to pay for it, this is what it's going to look like for DC. So that's like actually something that we're trying to develop right now with George Washington University, to get a resource guide on PrEP, like where to get it, who's going to pay for it, who's eligible for it. So we're working on that now. We want to engage community members about biomedical prevention methods. So after we train these service providers, the idea is to go into the community and have representation from these different service providers and just engage the community. We'll talk about a little bit more about that later in the presentation. And finally, we want to engage community members about navigating the services. Once again, the services are available, but you just might not know how to access it. So we just want to make sure we eliminate that barrier. Next slide, please. This is the provider training. My man from Gilead, can't remember his name, but he came out And these are some of the service providers. I intended it to be, well, I wanted it to be like way more packed. This is like my first kind of planned thing, so I was like, you know, nervous. Like one person was in the room and it was like 5 minutes before start time, and I'm just like, yo, it's like throwing a party and like nobody's coming. Like I feel like an unpopular kid right now. So I was excited when this many people showed up. So it was a really good meeting. We had various people representation here. You had people from the health department, people from government type agencies. So it was a lot of diversity. Community-based organization were in the room. So it was a great great turnout. Next slide, please. So this is one of the treatment education projects that we're going to focus on, because like I said earlier, Washington, D.C. needs to be educated, and then we need to know how to access the available services. So the first project around treatment education is going to be called What's the Deal with the Pill? Because we want to educate about all the options around biomedical prevention. So we plan to educate 25 community members. We want to increase their knowledge about PrEP and PEP, and we want to be able to make so they can make effective decisions around HIV prevention and treatment. So the way we're going to do this, you go to the next slide. Yeah. The way we're going to do this is just I explain all these pictures, they're kind of fun. So the way we're going to do this, we're going to do a community day event. This event did not happen yet, but this is just, I'll explain what this stuff is. We're going to do a community day event. We engage the community, like I said, with the service providers. We're going to have the resource guide. We're going to have all that stuff readily available, sign-up sheets, information stuff, anything you can think of that will create awareness and promote PEP and PrEP and HIV awareness and how to access the services. So here we have two members of BTAN. She represents National Congress Negro Women, and she represents AHF Foundation. So you know, we're pretty diverse here. This is the BTAN table. This event was on National HIV Testing Day down on Pennsylvania Avenue, and they allowed BTAN to have a table here. So we had a table, we had information about BTAN, what BTAN is. So this was like a way to basically tell the neighborhood, hey, we're here. BTAN is here. We're about to do this thing. So this is another event, community education group. That's the my host organization. We did Walgreens testing on this day. So once again, we had some BTAN stuff out there. So we're promoting BTAN any chance we get. This is a WSUR truck. I actually had a chance to do an interview spot about BTAN, which was pretty cool on the radio. That was my first radio interview, so I was mad nervous, but it went okay. This right here, UDC, this is they have what they call as a 930 club. They have some statistics that say every 9 minutes and 30 seconds someone's infected with HIV. So this is their little campaign that they do. We provide testing for them on their campus. Like I said, it's a lot of collaboration. You got to give a little to get a little. And I just have this picture up here because all these events happen like summertime, and it seemed like every event I went to, it was damn hot dogs. So I just had that there. Like, this is mine. Hey, next slide, please.
Over, Herman.
All right. So the second patient navigation, this is going to be like the second half of the first event. It's called Beat Your Feet. Now, Beat Your Feet, it's like a play on words. If you're familiar with DC, there's a music called go-go music, and there's a particular dance that people do to the go-go music called beating your feet. So I thought, hey, that would be kind of cool if you're talking about navigating services, beat your feet. So this program is going to increase the knowledge of what services are available and how to access the services. And we're going to do this by disseminating resource service guides. We're going to try to enroll community members on the spot by having the service providers actually there to do some networking as well. And we're going to do it in like a health fair type forum, but the focus will be solely on just increasing the knowledge about service providing and what services are available. How do you access the service? We want to get really intricate with it. Who do you talk to? What number you call? What day you go on? So that we can just eliminate the barrier of not knowing. Next slide, please. BTAN DC disclosure. I had this image here because once again I said we're not ready for this yet. We're not ready for this because we still need to be educated and we still need to utilize the resources that we already had. So I got this kind of unknown space happening here because I don't know what this is going to look like. Next slide, please. DC advocacy. No, we can't have any advocates yet because we need to train, we need to educate. So before we get to this place of advocacy, like we were in the 50s and the 60s, when we did those movements and we were more unified, we need to come together and just educate. So That's why the stop sign is there. Because before, we want to make sure our advocates know what they're doing, well equipped, well trained, and are ready for the fight. Next slide, please. B10 project plan. So how does your project proposal plan relate to the findings of your needs assessment? Like I stated earlier, we know that there are tons of services available, but people just are not accessing the services for a plethora of reasons, but mainly because they just don't know. So we want to increase the knowledge about the services and options available. We want to increase the knowledge about the accessibility. We want to create opportunities to network. So we're going to have that provider day when the providers come out and engage the community with the resource guides and information. And did your project proposal plan need to be revised? Okay, so the revisions and stuff, you go to the next slide. No, it did not need to be revised. And why? Next slide. Because I'm the chair. So pretty much what I say pretty much went. So it was a cool experience. This is my first time kind of operating in this capacity, and it was really cool. Like, everybody got along, the ideas were great, but at the end of the day, what I say went. So that was pretty cool. Next slide, please. All right, process outcome evaluation. So monitoring process. All right, so the way that we're going to monitor, right now we haven't implemented either of our projects around treatment education or patient navigation, but we're going to do this through surveys, interviews. We want to see what people know, and we want to give them what they need to know, and we want to see if they retained after. So we're going to do surveys, interviews, questionnaires. We're going to have sign-up sheets to see if a person is interested in the service. We'll sign you up right then on the spot, maybe get you an appointment, whatever it takes, just to make sure that you're engaged and you know what's happening. Also, when we do our project for the 25, we're going to educate the 25 community members. It's going to be incentivized to kind of help people want to participate in that. We're going to give you Safeway cards, food cards. Everybody likes to eat, so you can do the next slide. Monitoring plan. Describe your plan for monitoring outcomes. Like I just said, we're going to do a lot of surveys. And this is like a gray area for me. I'm still kind of learning about how to actually monitor a program. But I do know that through pre and post tests and evaluation surveys, that's a good way to see what changes you need to make and what things work and how you can move forward better. You go to the next slide. All right, successes and challenges. All right, so,
sorry.
I know you're good. I did want to read all that. Successes and challenges in AAHU. So one of the successes, I have this picture of pills here. Before I came to this program, I really knew little about medication, the science and treatment behind HIV. But now, after going through this program, I have a really strong understanding of how medicine works. And I actually have done a couple of one-on-ones and presentations on that to be able to relate that information back to community members. And we did it at a couple of churches as well. It unified us within the cohort, and it also strengthened us because we have this knowledge, so now we have some power. So now we can go back and bring others up. There were happy moments, successes, very happy moments, especially when we collaborated with with other partners and they actually did what they said they were going to do. And there were some low moments. The workload sometimes when you're, yes, that's alcohol. The workload sometimes was a little strenuous on top of your regular daily activity. So there was some low moments where you just feel frustrated, like, oh my God, is this going to get done? What's happening? And then you got the soldier crying. It's good. I mean, it's coming to a close. So it's a little saddening, you know, that you develop these relationships with these great people, and although we'll still be in contact as a network, just that face to face, you know, it's coming to an end. Like, I'm not going to see you guys after this, so you know, we won't cry yet. But you know, that was my success, and I guess the real challenge was just trying to balance the workload and as far as just being a fellow. But other than that, it was a really great experience, and I'm glad I went through it. Next slide, please. Conclusions and recommendations. All right. So, conclusion and future mobilization recommendations. The next steps. This is going to be very interesting. So, the next steps, like I said, we're going to do our 2 events. We're trying to do this between no later than October. So by September and October, we want to have the community day event where we'll have this information set out, the sign-up sheets, and then from that, I'll be able to go back to the service providers and say, hey, look, because I know a lot of service providers, they need recruitment for their clinics and stuff like that. So this will be a good way to kind of measure the engagement of the community. So the next steps will be, after getting them this information, linking them into the services, or linking them into these navigating them actually into these services to make sure that they use them. So those are our next steps. How will increase leadership in the network? That's an interesting one. Because I guess I myself, I'm going through a leadership moment, so that's interesting. I don't really know how to increase the leadership in the network. I don't know. I really don't. Find some recommendations for future training and advocacy in your community. Future trainings, I think it's always great to do basic HIV 101s to target areas like the church. The church is definitely influential in the community, so as long as we keep the church engaged, then I think it'll make an impact somewhat. There are other pockets that don't access religious organizations, but there are other services set up to address those populations. Next slide, please. So let's make change, guys, because that's what we do, and that's what we're here for. Next slide, please. Thank you very much for your time. Is there any questions?